Welcome to Dairyland Frights. I'm your host, John, and this is the paranormal podcast that covers everything spooky, creepy, and mysterious in the Midwest and beyond. And today, I have one of my favorite guests on. I had him on before, and his name is Randy Overbeck. He's an author. Welcome, Randy.
Well, I'm delighted to be back and be able to join you, John, and talk a little bit more about both my books and ghosts.
Yes. And by the way, if you want to go back and listen to our first episode together, not only we talked about his book at that time, but also we talked a little bit about ghosts and some of the interesting research behind it, and some of the things Randy has talked to people about it, and some of his findings. So it's also is exciting because I love having authors on because they always are really interesting, not only interesting, but also I love independent authors on because they're the lifeblood, in my opinion, of, getting new books out there. And the independent author, sometimes understand has an uphill battle. And anytime I can kind of help get them out there, and, it's always new rather than nothing against Stephen King or any of the other great authors out there. They've been doing it for a while. They're fine. They don't need our money and they don't need our time. They're doing okay. They're going to be fine.
It's good. It's fine. Exactly.
So let's get right to it, Randy. You have a new novel, and let's talk about it and kind of give an idea what it's about and, share it with our spooky friends. There we go.
Okay, well, we'll start with the cover. This is, it's called Red Shadows at Saugatuck. I'll tell you a lot about it in a minute, but before I do that, it is the fourth entry in the Haunted Shore Mystery Series. The series has won 12 national awards so far.
Ooh, congratulations.
And it has 2 best-selling titles among the group. So it's been very, very popular with paranormal readers and those people who just like mysteries in general have really flocked to it. And to be honest with you, John, this is the best work I've done to date. I'm really proud of it. So the stick is my stick is that I look for interesting, not very well-known resort locations that I also can match up with a great ghost story, and I craft a fiction about those places. The first one was on the eastern shore of the Chesapeake Bay. The second place was at Cape May, New Jersey, and then the third one, the last one before this, was in Florida, a place called Crystal River, Florida. And in my characters, in the backstory of my character, he's actually from Michigan, so I wanted to bring him back to Michigan, and I looked for a really interesting place in Michigan and found one in this place called Saugatuck, which is a really welcoming, beautiful resort town on the western edge of Michigan, or if you look at it the other way, the eastern shore of Lake Michigan. It's actually where the Kalamazoo River flows into Lake Michigan. It has a lot of really interesting characteristics about it, and I was able to capture some neat aspects about the town in the story. But my ghost part, which is also kind of my murder part, I chose it because of its proximity to a Native American reservation area, because the murder is about a missing Native teen. So the tribe in the area is called, they're actually a branch of the Ojibwe, but we've bastardized it. They're called the Gun Lake tribe.
Okay.
They're famous in the area because they have a Gun Lake casino. Okay? But actually, my book takes place before the casino opens. But I wanted to have the combination of this really intriguing, very small town. When they're not overflowing with visitors, we're talking a couple thousand, not a very big town.
Mm-hmm.
But they're really famous as an art town, and they have all these really neat aspects of it.
Okay.
And I was able to layer this mystery about ghosts and Native Americans on top of that town.
I love that. I absolutely love that. So you kind of talked a little bit about this. But what inspired you to write this particular book? You kind of were like looking around, right? But what was like, that's it. This is what I want to write.
Well, I've read and from several other authors and some on my own, have read a lot about Native Americans, their belief in spirituality and ghosts. And I actually came upon some research that I read about the MMIW, MMIW, which stands for Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women.
Yeah.
It was an organization put together, I think, in 14 or 15. Again, this book happens in 2007, but it what but it's able to, its intent is to capture the problems that Native women are having. I mean, when I did the research, it just amazed me. And I went, well, this is really fertile ground for exploring the possibility of what's happening to these young girls and women, and then building that into a mystery that takes place in this gorgeous town.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so let me ask you this. You kind of led me into my next question. So, when you were doing your research, Randy, did you uncover anything surprising or fascinating? It kind of sounds like you did, right? Kind of sounds like you
Yeah,
were like, "Wow,
I,
I this is I
well,
never
like
knew this."
what I've learned with each of the research I've done in my books, like the research on human trafficking, the
Mm,
research on abuse of migrants in the South, I find out how little I really know about this.
yeah.
Did you know, for example, in human trafficking, that every 5 minutes a young girl in America gets sucked into human trafficking?
Ye
I didn't know any of that.
Wow.
The MMIW, they've documented that Native women get murdered, raped, abducted, or kidnapped at a rate 10 times that of
Yes.
white women.
Yeah, I've
And
heard
I
that.
thought, well, this is really compelling information that is not in the public knowledge. And I thought, well, it would be nice to merge that as part of the story. It's really it's not a teaching text. It's really a fun mystery. It
Yeah.
involves it involves a yacht. There's a lot of stuff about these real expensive yachts that are on Lake Michigan. This huge mansion that Daryl goes to see his great aunt. All these other factors are involved, but I wanted to mine the other aspects about the bigger issue and even be able to tie the ghost part to that.
Yeah. Yeah, so let's talk about that a little bit. You said with the I'm just kind of reading things here, and please correct me. I just got this off your website and stuff, and like it says this new paranormal mystery takes Daryl, Erin, and their 5-year-old son Leo to a quiet resort town in Lake Michigan for a family event. Only when the Henshaw family learns of some missing teenagers and asks about the teen girls, they end up confronting a puzzling mystery tied to the MMIW, missing and murdered Indigenous women, with the help of a ghost of a murdered teen. So tell me about that. That's interesting.
But one of the things that I like that I did a little differently here that I did in the first, well, two major changes. The first one I want to talk about is Leo. So there's what was a romantic, now a family arc in the 4 books. So in the first book, Daryl and Leo meet. In the second book, they fall in love. In the third book, they're actually married. This book takes place 7 years after that. So the first 3 books ended in 2000. This actually takes place in 2007. And they have a 5-year-old son who is a really interesting, precocious little boy, but he also happens to have inherited his father's gift of seeing ghosts,
Okay.
which places him in the middle of the same danger that Daryl often encounters because he sees ghosts and then tries to act on it. So that was one part that makes this a really, really interesting read. It's a lot about family love. Daryl's extended family is there, so all of that, as well as the family side of the young girl that's been murdered. So I really liked those elements that I could build a story around. The other part is, for Native Americans, the concept of spirituality, the concept of ghosts is just an extension of their regular beliefs. So they have, as you probably know, they have a much greater respect for their elders than
Yes.
do white people. They have an even greater respect for their ancestors, and the idea of learning from their ancestors who have passed on in some kind of a ghost fashion is just natural to them. That doesn't seem the
Mhm.
ordinary at all. And so what I did, I mean, I could have explored. There's lots of evil ghosts that Native American tribes have, and I did my
Yeah.
research on that. I don't know if the Navajos have a ghost that they call skinwalkers.
Yes.
Tony Hillerman talked about those in some of his books. There's a tribe called the Passamaquoddy that have a ghost called a Scatamagooch, which is a ghost witch, and even the Ojibwe have a ghost that they call the Wendigo,
Mm.
which is a very evil ghost.
Yeah.
So and other authors have used those, and I thought about that. But instead, what I did was I used the idea about ghosts, of that ghosts are people who have died, but then come back in some way or fashion and talk to or communicate with the people on humans. And there's a chapter in the book, besides where the ghost is appearing, there's a chapter I wrote in the book where Daryl is interviewing this young girl's mother. And Daryl is at this point does not know what happened to her, but knows that she's gone missing. And when he interviews her, the mother tells Daryl she's dead. I know she's dead.
Mm-hmm.
And Daryl says, well, do you know what happened to her? Where, and she doesn't. She said, but I know because she appeared to me and talked to me.
Mm-hmm.
So it's that part of their belief in spirituality that's a natural extension that I tried to build into the story.
Yeah. So the biggest differences for me versus, like, and you kind of mentioned it, versus Native American people versus just a regular person, right? It is kind of like when I've interviewed people on the show, Randy, they've talked to me about, like, my grandma or my grandpa would reach out to me, say, it's okay, I'm fine, don't worry about me. And, because people were close to that person. Now, Native Americans, not to say that we have our cryptids, right? And they're not as bad as, like, the Wendigo. And I did a episode on that. The Wendigo is really something that you're like, okay, this is horror movie stuff, right?
Yeah, right.
And everything. So when you were doing your research, was there a point in a time where you said, okay, the story can go this way? Because, I mean, human trafficking and things like that is evil. You know what I mean? I mean, it's a terrible, terrible thing that happens every day. And especially to the Native American women. You were bringing up that statistic. I've heard other statistics where, these women are disappearing and literally, like, seems every day. I don't know if that's true, but it seems like it, right? And nobody cares. So you would think that would bring quite a bit of, I don't know, evil and them understanding things. So when you were doing your book, was there a point you said, like, when you were going through, I could have went this way or that way. Was there a point where you were thinking, would this be more, I don't know, interesting to the reader, I guess? And why did you decide, like, I'm not gonna do that. I think it takes it in a whole different direction. I may not like.
Well, what I decided I wanted to focus on was human evil,
Mm-hmm.
not evil that it might exist in the spiritual world.
Yes.
I don't know if I think I chose not to include this in the book, but what was guided me by was the saying, which Martin Luther King quoted, but he was not the first one to say it, that all it takes for evil to prosper is for good men to do nothing.
Yes.
And so what I have happen is what I attempted to capture fictionally in the story was the real situation that you were just describing, that these Native women seem to disappear, and nobody is really surprised or upset or worried about it.
Yeah.
What I did is I captured in several of the townspeople their reaction to the. So let me back up. What happens in the beginning is, because I have this 5-year-old that I can tell the story partly through, he sees a flyer, one of the missing flyers with this girl's name on. That's how the whole thing gets started. And he, in his innocence, goes, Dad, we got to find this girl. She's been missing he said, how long is that? And his dad tells him and says, well, is that a long time? Well, we got to go find her. So he goes off and he's asking people about this girl, and their response is, don't worry about it. Those girls disappear all the time. Most of the time they come back here, half the time they have a papoose on their back when they come back. I mean, so that kind of prejudice rhetoric is what I was trying to focus on, as opposed to the Wendigo or anything like that, because in my opinion that's a more real evil than the other side.
Yeah. And by the way, the Native American burial ground, and we were talking offline, Randy and I have a little fun with this too. Really, I mean, Pet Cemetery, and you know what I mean? Like, it's a Native American, and then you bury someone, they come back and they're evil. Okay, Been there, done that, right? So that leads me to my next question, because anyone listening to this right now is probably going, "Wow, Randy, this is really heavy. I'm not sure if I want to read this book," but obviously it has a great message. But what message or theme do you want the readers to take away from your book, Randy?
Well, I mean, I don't want to over dramatize the serious aspects of the story that they are clearly embedded in there. But readers will find the story fun. They'll find life looking through Leo's eyes at all the new experiences. Really interesting and fascinating. One part of this, just to give an example, that's a fun one part of the story. They go on a dune buggy ride. Now this is just an example. They have something I've never seen anyplace else. So they have this. It isn't really a dune buggy. It's a converted truck. That's like a huge dune buggy that fits 9 people, and they put behind the wheel and they send you off. And they've created what really is like a roller coaster in a dune buggy, because they have all these sands that they fixed so it can't go out of the rut. And they're going 30 and 40 miles an hour around these curves and up and down. And little Leo is just going crazy, loving the experience and stuff. And even that, I found a way to put something of the ghost part into there. But the readers will be so involved in the enjoying the experience of sharing the experience that the others are having. They're gonna get a great deal of that, and there's a lot of that. This town has the only chain ferry that still exists in the United States, and a chain ferry is. Have you been on one? It's where you actually. Okay, so they have a very narrow river. So the Kalamazoo River isn't very wide. It isn't a football field across. Probably less than that. Probably 150 feet from one end to the other. But they have to get across, instead of a bridge, they have a chain ferry. Okay, so a chain ferry is exactly what it looks like. They have a chain that runs down to the bottom, and you literally crank the chain to get from one side to the other. A chain ferry has been operating on that river since the 1860s, or I remember now. I did my research then, and I asked, well, why in the world couldn't they just walk across it? And they said, well, it's very deep. So it's like, I don't know, 20, 30 feet deep for a river. And the current is really strong. And they said when the settlers first came across and tried to cross, they would lose horses, people would drown. So they made this chain ferry. Anyway, one part of it that's really fun, Leo gets to operate the chain ferry.
Nice.
So he can actually crank the chain, which I saw them doing that with kids on there. And then in the middle of that process, he sees the girl that he thinks they're looking for, the girl that's on the missing poster, which turns out to be the ghost, but he doesn't know that at the time, because being 5, he can't always distinguish when he's seeing a ghost and when he's seeing a person.
Right. So let's talk about characters a little bit. Was there any character in the book particularly that you related to? Maybe when you were a little kid, or maybe you have a grandson or a neighbor's kid or somebody. When you were coming up with that character, that 5-year-old, I mean, it sounds like the 5-year-old is almost like 5 going on 20.
Yeah, that's exactly how I wrote. Yeah, he has the curiosity of a 5-year-old.
Yeah, how did you decide that? Because that's interesting to me.
Well, and I have both children, and I've raised children and helped raise grandchildren. So there's lots of kids. And yes, I think I probably based Leo on some of the characteristics of my own children, some of whom had an insatiable curiosity. And that's how I built Leo. Leo wants to find out about everything. Well, what is this? There's a part in the story where this beautiful house has glass panes in the ceiling. And Leo wants to know why they put windows in the ceiling. Why would you put windows in the ceiling? Never seen a house with windows in the ceiling. What are windows doing up there? Aren't they supposed to be on the other side? So it's those kinds of, and I use those to help keep the tone light throughout much of the story. We also meet Daryl's family. So he has a brother, and there's a backstory that I won't go into, but there's a backstory about an event that occurred in the first book that involves his brother and why his brother limps as an adult. So we have a quick little visit of that. His brother has his wife who is pregnant, which they just learn on the spot. So Leo's all excited about having a cousin and stuff. Yeah. So there's all those kind of family things. And then there's this Aunt Gertrude, who's kind of like a crusty, know-it-all, matriarchal aunt that they've come to celebrate her 80th birthday. That's actually the impetus of the whole story. So
yeah,
I was able to pull on a lot of characters to be able to create this story of family, because the story is really about family. It's about how important those people are to you. And then by extension, this young girl, this teenage girl that goes missing and murdered, how important that she was to her family, and nobody else outside the mother and the native community even care about it.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's just really interesting to me. So I always love to ask this question of authors. Which one of your fictional characters in your books, or maybe in another book if you'd like, but I want to focus on your books, excuse me, that you would love to have a conversation with?
You know, people have often asked me, "Do you see ghosts?" I have had a one personal experience where I saw a ghost, but I don't I don't see ghosts the way Daryl does. Now, Daryl has some OCD issues, which make it kind of interesting, but I think I would love to have a conversation with Daryl about, because at this point he's 20 years into being a sensitive, being able to see ghosts. And although he's still not really thrilled about it, it is not the right, I'm in this again issue that it was when he first encountered it. So that's a very good question. I think I would enjoy that a lot. There's an interesting character in this book that the readers may or may not be a bad guy. His name is Salazar. He's the caretaker for this huge mansion, and he's a really interesting character. I think readers are going to enjoy that.
Yeah, I love that. But let's since this is a paranormal podcast, let's talk a little bit about ghosts. So last time we talked, Randy, you kind of gave me, you've been on, lectures and having conversations with people in general.
A
Has
lot.
anything changed from that? Any of your beliefs that you went, well, I'm kind of going this way now, leaning that way?
I think when I started on this path, which is probably about 2014, around that time, I would have classed myself as I certainly wasn't a skeptic, but I wasn't wholeheartedly in. I used to describe myself in the way that Shakespeare described it, in Hamlet, when he said, Horatio, there are more things in heaven and earth than are dreamt of in your philosophy. And that's kind of how I thought. As I have done more research, gone more places, talked to a lot of people, I continue to expand my belief in ghosts, and more importantly, my belief in people's ability to be able to perceive those ghosts. I've done, as I shared with you last time, I do about 30, 35, 40 presentations a year, most of them around ghosts, sometimes around haunted places or just the cultural aspects of ghosts. And it brings me in contact with thousands of people. And I would say that about every 3 or 4 times, maybe more often, I will end up with a personal conversation with someone either before I talk or after I talk, where they need to tell me this pressing story about the ghost. Now, most of the time, I don't know, half the time, it is an encounter with a ghost that's related to that person, that they had some kind of personal knowledge of. I will give you an example. So this just happened last week. So I'm doing a presentation. I've been doing a lot of senior center presentations.
Yeah.
And it has amazed me that the older adults are more inclined to believe in ghosts than are
Right.
younger adults. At least that has been my.
Interesting.
And so I gave this talk, and the guy came up to me and says, I got to tell you about this story. I said, okay. He said his father had died, I don't know, the year before, I think. It wasn't very long. And he said that he had been there up on his bed, his bedside before he died at the hospital, and he was on his way home. And he said he had just bought a Corvette, not the father, the son. And he said that when he left the hospital and he's driving home in the Corvette, he turns and his father appears in the seat next to him in the Corvette. And the father says, what did you buy this piece of shit for it? And I said, did he have some against Corvettes? He said he hated Corvettes. And then he laughed and his father disappeared. But he said that was at the exact time that he found out later that his father died in the hospital.
Wow.
So I have probably heard some variation of that story. Oh, I don't know, 20 times, 30 times probably. And that's kind of half. And then the other half of the time, I'll get the opposite story. I'll get a story where someone is going into someplace either new for them or like in some cases, we got this house inherited from my mother-in-law, and my wife won't go in there because she says it's haunted, that kind of thing. Or there's a guy that came up to me at one of my presentations and said, have you ever been to, and he told me the name of the hotel, but I apologize because I can't remember it. It was a hotel in South Dakota. And he said, I was in this room, and this ghost appeared on this, and this. He said, I went down and said, get me a different room. And he found out later that this particular room is very famous for having someone died and it's haunted.
Yeah.
So those kinds of stories are very common. And most of the time, they're just told with, there's no guile in the person telling them. They're just saying,
Right.
hey, look, this is what happened to me.
Yeah. I believe, and I still believe, Randy, that there are thousands of more stories that people have not told because they don't want to appear, I hate to use the word crazy, but whatever. Was there ever someone that came into you and was very like, I don't know if I should tell you this?
Oh,
And,
yeah.
yeah.
But sometimes they do this. Can I tell you this story?
Yeah. And that to me is really interesting because I don't see it as, and, this is just me because I love the paranormal. I think it's something I've heard stories where people who have, when they're sick, see a ghost, you know what I mean? In their room, and it's affected them until, all their life, maybe.
Right.
They you can't get it out. And also have heard things like where, I don't know if anybody's told you this, where they're like 18 and then their parents finally pull them aside and they go, all those times you came up to me and said, you saw a ghost in your room and all this stuff? Well, it's haunted. I didn't want to tell you because I didn't want you to freak out on us and go running out of that. My favorite story with that is this father, he bought this rocking chair, this woman was telling me, for the bedroom. So, they could like go in there when they're reading her a story and she could sit on her dad's lap or her mom's lap. And, one day she woke up and the rocking chair was moving by itself. And she was like, at first, kind of, dreaming. Parents are saying they're dreaming. And then one day she woke up and she saw like this figure of a man in this rocking chair rocking back and forth. And she told her parents, and her parents were like, yeah, okay. But the next day, the rocking chair was mysteriously gone. I love stories like that where people are just like, well, okay. So let me ask you this: when you're talking about ghosts and things of that nature, like what I think is interesting that is becoming more prevalent is like ghosts are more inhabiting objects, certain rooms, certain areas. Why do you have any idea of why that's true or maybe not true? Because I just think it's interesting because, for example, cursed doll. I cannot take when someone shows me like, oh, this is a cursed doll and everything like that. But then I think to myself, well, how did this doll get cursed? Like, you know what I mean? Like, how did that ghost go into that or that spirit go into that? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I will say this. One of the things I do in a talk that I give them is I talk about, I don't know whether I mentioned this last time, that the belief in ghosts exists in every religion in the world. So if you examine the dogma or the doctrine of Judaism, Muslim, Buddhism, any religion, there is embedded in there a belief in ghosts, but the belief in ghosts are not the same. In Eastern religions, their perspective on ghosts are about the reverse of ours. So I blame Stephen King for this, but in the Western world, people's automatic reaction to ghosts is one of fear. If someone's in that rocking chair, I better get the hell out of here because something bad's going to happen. That's kind of our conditioned response. Okay. In the Eastern world, they actually have the opposite response. They think that human beings should treat ghosts as, because they are suffering spirits, they should be treated with compassion. They shouldn't be feared. Okay. The reason I'm saying that to lead into what you're saying is, as I have looked into documented ghost events, okay, almost all of those are benevolent. I've found it very difficult to verify any kind of Stephen King kind of ghost. No offense to Stephen King, it does make for a great story. I'm not complaining.
Yeah.
Okay, but it does condition, and it's not. I mean, it was started long before Stephen King, so he just
Right. Yeah.
better at it than a lot of other people are.
Yeah.
But it is a Western thing about ghosts bad, ghosts evil. My experience is there's no evidence. So when they say, well, ghosts inhabit someplace, my answer is, from what I have researched, oftentimes ghosts are tied to a place, usually where they die, but not always. And there's some reason why they are sticking around. I tell the story. I think you heard me tell the story, but Al Unser Jr. No, Dale Earnhardt Jr., the NASCAR racer. Did I tell you that story? In 2003, Dale was doing a practice run on a track in South Carolina. I don't know that I'm not a race guy. I'm not a car guy. I don't know what happened, but mechanical problems. The car explodes, blows up. Dale, they're on this race. Their team was the only one on the racetrack. The team comes running across the track. When they get to the other side of the track, Dale is lying in the grass about 20 yards, unconscious, from this burning car. And everybody's relieved. When he comes to, he says a ghost literally pulled him from the car. And in the interview, he said the ghost was the ghost of his father, Dale Earnhardt Sr. So I just use that as an example of the reasons why ghosts are around are often for some kind of purpose, either to resolve something that they need resolved for themselves or for somebody else. I think there are ghosts that end up between here and the next world, and they kind of like it there. So they play games with, like, there are a number of ghosts have been documented to turn light switches on and off, to knock glasses off, to do those kinds of things, open a window. And I think some of that is them asking to be noticed, wanting somebody to pay attention to help them. I don't put a lot of credence in, oh, the ghost inhabited this creature, and voodoos have believed that forever.
Yeah.
I'm certainly not going to say I know better than they do. Now, I'm talking about when I have tried to look to a scientific investigation where it's some evidence that something is happening here that doesn't have a rational explanation. The temperature, I talked about the temperature change in a room, an orb of light appearing in a closed space that there is no light in there. So there are those things that can be scientifically documented. It's on video, or the temperature thing has been recorded. It's on audio. But none of those things, I've not come up with any of those that then they have some kind of malevolent intent connected to those results. Other people will have a different perspective, and I understand that and I accept that, but that's not been what I've been able to find.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting because let's be honest, blood and gore sells tickets. I mean,
Right.
and I get it. I've spoken to numerous people who live in a haunted house or have lived in a haunted house, and they all say the same thing to me. No, it's not like I wake up and the kitchen drawers are flying and like there's shadows all over the walls. Like, no, occasionally they said it's more like a nuisance. Like they wake up and like all the cabinet doors are open and they're like,
Right.
ugh. I
Or the
gotta
lights
close
on that
this.
they turned
Yeah,
off when
yeah.
upstairs.
Or there's a little tugging on my sheets, or it's just something to that effect. And I get it that you have to sell tickets and so on and so forth. But we have found out from research on like Amityville House as well as the Conjuring House that it's maybe not what you think it's all about. That was in the movies, as well as, not to get on a totally different topic, but like Ed and Lorraine Warren, they've been proven to maybe not be the top people you thought they were. And like Annabelle, for example, is going on tour and they're charging a lot of money to see a doll that, well, maybe or maybe not, or allegedly may be cursed. And again, that kind of comes back to I don't see that as a big deal. I see a lot of coincidence that might happen, like, oh, I touched the doll and then my life went horrible. Well, as we know, life can be random, right? Just
Right.
things happen. It's just like today you're great and tomorrow, I don't know, your roof caved in. And you're like, wait a minute, how did that happen? I think that's just really interesting with that. Let me ask you this too, kind of on a different topic with ghosts too. We were talking about, especially your character in the book, having gifts and everything. Have you spoken to mediums or psychics or empaths, and kind of what's your collective I don't know, idea or answers when you're talking to them, trying to figure out how they do it and what their gifts are and so on and so forth?
I think of the few, I've not talked with very many, so I don't have a vast experience. But what I understand, what they explain is, why is it surprising that some people have this particular gift and others don't? Everybody's not Kobe Bryant,
Yeah.
He's got a special gift, Pete
Yeah.
Rose was Pete Rose. Nobody else was Pete Rose. Bryce Harper is, so there are Alex Rodriguez can do what nobody else can do. Joe Burrow can throw the football like nobody else. So they all have special gifts that they have that they can use. So it's not that surprising that there is a small portion that may have a gift that be able to see things that other people can't see. And it may be that they're more willing to see it, or it may be that they have some that, like Daryl, they've had some experience that
Right.
has led them to be able to have that. So when people ask me that, I'm going, look, I think it's people. I think some people have ESP. Why could they not? Why should that be one area where there couldn't be some people that have extra refined ability in that area when we believe this person has extra refined math ability and has science ability? So this is just one more human area that certainly some people could have a stronger belief or stronger ability than others. The problem, I mean, mediums certainly exist. The problem is that there are so many people who try to be charlatans and
Yeah.
try to fool that it's like ghost pictures. Somebody said, well, how come we don't have modern ghost pictures? And my answer
Right.
is, well, it used to be Photoshop. I said, now it's going to be AI. You can make
Yeah.
anything look like anything. I said, so you have to rely on your own knowledge of what's going on and be kind of open. I think people who see ghosts are more open to being able to see that. I was on a tour in Nashville, ghost tour, and we were going by, and they're talking about places that were haunted. And I look into this. This was a closed room, a darkened room that you were peering into, and other people did not see it, but I saw a clear orb in the room moving around erratically. Now, why didn't the person behind me see that? I don't know. Maybe it was gone by then. Maybe they don't have maybe they're not more willing to see that than somebody else.
Yeah. And I think that's really interesting because, again, going back to the argument, everyone has, an iPhone or a phone. Why don't we have all these pictures of ghosts? Well, I understand that, but part of the thing, if a ghost would just pop up in front of me right now, I'm probably not thinking of grabbing my phone. I'm probably going, whoa, you know what I mean? And it's not going to stay there like in the movies and just float there and be ever. And I always tell people, yeah, you watch too many movies. If you're thinking like it's a blip, because it takes a lot of power and energy for that person to be there. As long and us too. I mean, people don't understand. I mean, we're full of electricity and all these things going through our veins just to keep us alive, just to move from here to there. And if you think you have a spirit, it's going to use energy too. It can't just be like, here I am, kind of attitude and stuff like that. Let me ask you a question. I don't know if you've studied this at all, but the new method right now, I shouldn't say new, but relatively new, I guess, is the Estes method, where people, put on headphones and blindfolds and stuff, and then they just are in that space, right? And shutting out all noise and everything like that. What is your feeling on that? Have you looked into that at all or heard
I
anything?
haven't. I've not experienced that, and I haven't examined it. I haven't talked to any group who have done that. I don't know enough about that. One of the things when I talk to these groups, I'm very, very careful. I go, look, guys, I'm not an expert. I happen to have learned a lot because I had to
Yeah.
do a lot of research on this
Yeah.
in order to make the books realistic, in order to make them believable.
Yeah.
But this is an area that's way beyond my.
Yeah,
No,
sure. I just think it's interesting, and I love that they're always thinking of new ways to try to contact the spirit world and everything like that. But getting back really quickly to like mediums and psychics and stuff like that, one of the things I've talked to a number of them, and they're very interesting people. One of the things is they keep telling me, and maybe Randy and me can figure this out, is everyone has gifts. You just have to develop. It's kind of like, I'll use the simple analogy of riding a bike. Like when you were a little kid and riding a bike, you usually got on the bike and you fell over and you got right. But eventually, you could ride a bike. And now, even we're in our a little older and stuff, I'm sure me and you could get on a bike, maybe not go too far, but at least get on a bike and pedal and go here. And that's
I'll be riding a bike tomorrow. Yes.
excellent. And that's one of the things I always find fascinating because they're all like, you have it in you. You may not have certain skills and everything like that. So when you were writing your book and writing the character of Daryl and stuff, was there a point where you were thinking, wait a minute, how do I transfer this skill? Or like it just shows up, or you know what I mean, to his son, Leo?
Well, so that's a very good. I had decided when I was um, not organizing, that's the wrong word, but inventing this story. I had decided that I wanted to have a 5-year-old. I thought it would be a nice extension, and I wanted the 5-year-old to, without really knowing it, be able to see ghosts. He didn't even know. And I was trying to figure out, well, how would I make that happen? So what I have a scene in the story where Daryl is finishing up football practice. Mom and Leo are coming to see Dad at football practice, and next to the football field is a park. So Leo goes over and, can I go play on the park? And then they're playing on the park, and Leo is talking to somebody. There's nobody else there but Leo. His mom doesn't think anything of it because kids talk to imaginary people all the time and stuff. Um, Later on, Leo comes back over and says, "Can I go down the big slide?" She said, "I don't know if you." He said, "I forget the girl. I forget the name I gave to the girl ghost." Madeline says it's more fun than anything else, and I want to go down that. I said, "Madeline, yeah, the girl over there, the girl I'm playing with." Anyway, to make a long story short, Daryl and Aaron investigate and go to the neighboring cemetery and find that this little girl died when she was 6 years old, and they have to explain to Leo that the ghost has come to play with because she didn't get enough time playing when she was alive. That's kind of how I decided to introduce Leo's gift.
Yeah, I love that. I love that you're being original, that it isn't one of those things where they got into a car accident or he fell off a bridge, or, you know what I mean? Like the
Yeah,
tropes. Like
yeah,
that
right.
already bugs me, because then you're
Yeah, he
thinking of
got
people
hit by
going,
lightning. Got
yeah,
struck
yeah,
by
yeah,
lightning.
yeah. Like people who are going to start to do that. Like, what do you, no, no, this is a movie. They just threw that in there.
Yeah, well, and Daryl's origin story is similar but different. He sees ghosts. So in Blood on the Chesapeake, he sees ghosts when he's 13. The problem is the ghost that he sees is an uncle that he thinks betrayed his family. And the uncle is a ghost talking to him to tell him to be careful about something. And he doesn't believe the ghost. So he wants to shut that whole experience out, even though he knew the uncle was dead, he knew that this was a ghost. It was, anyway. So with him, it evolves more naturally, but it becomes a negative experience
Right.
because of who this ghost was.
Yeah, I love that. So I always have to ask this of authors. I think it's kind of funny because this has happened to me. When you were doing research for the books or any of the books, was there any time where you kind of felt not scared, but like maybe you felt like somebody's watching you, or you feel a little uneasy, or you're like, am I just in my head? Because I'm here, it's like, I don't know, 8 p.m, and I've been on this quite a bit today. And anything like that where you felt like
No,
nothing
that's
like that?
never been an issue for me. I will something similar to that sometimes because when I go to these places, I often ask about native ghosts, local ghosts,
Yeah.
because sometimes I'll include local ghosts in the stories. I did in Crimson and Cape May. There's two famous local ghosts that exist in Cape May that I decided, oh, well, they would be a nice add to my fictional ghost for the story. So, and when I'm asking about that, sometimes I'll get that, people going, what are you talking? That or I'll get the opposite. They're going, well, let me tell you the story about the ghost in the jailhouse. So supposedly, 1925, jailhouse burned down and three men were stuck in the bars. I get those kinds of stories as well.
Yeah. And you realize, like, I mean, time now can be a little bit rough, right? But back then, I mean, there were no safety measures or anything. Like, something like there were no sprinkler systems in jails or anything like that. There's a fire, you burned alive, you can't get
Yep.
out. Ugh.
But it gets her to get you out. That's exactly right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's why
that
go
was in
ahead.
Florida when I did the research for Crystal River in Florida. I didn't end up including that. That was actually in a neighboring town, but that was one of the examples that they gave me of ghosting. So, that's kind of part of what I do in the area now. And what I was trying to do differently in this book was I was trying to tap into the Native Americans, for them, ghosts aren't something else. Ghosts are part of what they see as the spirituality of the world around them. So the fact that her daughter, appeared to her as a mermaid, that seemed natural to her because in their culture, women are responsible for water, men are responsible for fire. That's in the Gun Lake tribe culture. So it wasn't like, I mean, she's grieving, she's desolate because she's lost her daughter, but the ghost experience is just a natural extension of life for them. So I was trying to use that as part of as one of the threads of the story.
Yeah. And a lot of Native American tribes have spirit animals, the wolf, the bear, and everything. Did you ever consider, and maybe it's in your book, using an animal to?
No, I did look that up, and they have a spirit animal of a wolf for their tribe. The problem is that I was trying to stay very focused on the murder mystery, on the first the missing, and then they figure out that she's been murdered. And I was trying to keep one of my goals always with my books is to keep the pacing really tight.
Yeah.
So that every chapter does something. We don't get very far afield from what we are doing. Even as Daryl and Aaron and Leo are exploring this fun new town, each exploration actually moves the story forward because it gives us some new revelation about the ghost and what may have happened to her.
Sure.
So I tried to stay very closely on tight. So I did not, even though Daryl meets with a tribal elder and Daryl gets information from the tribal elder about what we now call MMIW. Didn't exist at the time. And Daryl is learning about that pretty much for the first time in 2007. Those parts I have built in. And one of the things I did in this book that was really important to me is before I wrote the book, I sat down with two actual tribal elders and talked to them about my idea. This is what I think I want to do. Do you have some suggestions? And ask them for a direction on language. What language can I use that's not considered derogatory?
Mm-hmm.
What language would they use that would likely be, what language would the natives use? What language might whites use? Those kinds of things. And then when I finished, they vetted those parts of the book to make sure that they stayed within those rounds because I'm very sensitive. I'm not a Native American. I don't have that heritage. I don't have that background.
Yeah.
But I wanted to make sure that the book reflected those beliefs and where they're coming from, at least in 2007. Put it that way.
Yeah, that is great. I was going to ask you that because I think that's super important because again, you want to make it as authentic as possible and not offensive to people that are reading this. And I'm sure there'll be people who will read it and be like, I don't know about that kind of attitude, but that's always for everything. There's always going to be something, throw it in there. Before we wrap up here, Randy, this is another great conversation. I love talking to you and I'm excited for your book and definitely want to read it. But I have some fun questions for you before we wrap up here. So if your book or books were adapted into a film, who would be your dream cast for the main character?
Ooh, that's an interesting question. Now, originally I had chose Logan Layman as a good match for Daryl. I thought he would work really well. I think Salazar, somebody like a great old guy like Salazar, somebody like Robert De Niro would be super in that particular role. He would be fantastic. And I think any one of the dames that do such a wonderful job with their characters would play Aunt Gertrude. They would be wonderful with Aunt Gertrude. That would be. And I don't have an idea. I don't have no idea for what kid star I would pick for Leo. But that's a fun question.
Yeah, that's always a fun question I love to ask. And then I don't know if you're really into music, but I have to ask this too because music in movies to me is very important. It moves the scene. It makes you cry. It makes you laugh. It makes you scared or whatever. So if your book had a soundtrack, like is there any musician or maybe we know is popular, maybe we don't know who would maybe soundtrack to your book?
I have to admit, John, I love music. I listen to not all kinds, but I mean, wide variety, everything from rhythm and blues to smooth jazz and pop and country, bluegrass. I like it all. I'm not much. I can't really get into rap, but other than that, I'm classical. I love classical music as well. But I'm not an expert in any of it. It's more kind of like a something that I enjoy. I didn't even pay attention to who wrote it. My trailer will be out next week.
Okay.
The trailer has a really great. Now the trailer is only a minute long, so, it's not, but it has a wonderful soundtrack, and the soundtrack is called "Dancing with Ghosts." So people
Nice.
watch for the trailer and
Will do.
listen in particular for the soundtrack. See if
I love it.
you don't think it catches the essence of the mystery we've been talking about.
Yeah, I look forward to that. That sounds great. So, Randy, describe your writing space. What do you got? You got like maybe a beverage, or you got a bunch of messy notes, or what do you got?
I have a couple notes here. Oh, there you go. I'm kind of, but I'm not a I'm a specific note taker. We'll scroll this around. My space is relatively
Wow,
clear
that's
most of
clean.
the time. I always have a note or something I'm working on. I'm very, very fortunate. I have a beautiful writing space. My office, I have a huge, wonderful wood L-shaped desk. I usually have a beverage, sometimes alcoholic, but most not. I'm drinking my iced tea this afternoon.
There you go. All right.
It'll usually be a hot tea in the morning, and I have a view that I can show, but it's not going to show very well. I have a
Sure.
view out those windows that's of
Oh,
a beautiful
nice.
pond in a woods that sits right out that actually gets great color in the spring and the fall. So it is a wonderful place. It's funny you should ask that because we passed up Starbucks yesterday, day before, and I was reminded that there are several writers, some of my favorite writers, tell me stories that they spent their writing life early sitting in a coffee shop, not usually a Starbucks, but a private one, and they're doing their writing. And my wife said, "Well, you don't do that because you have the best writing space you could, right where you are, in your office." And she's exactly right. It is a, it every time I can sit here, I can honestly say this: there is never a time I'm sitting here and nothing comes to me.
I love it. I love it. That sounds awesome. I was expected books piled to the ceiling.
No, I'm a little now. You can see I have plenty of books behind me. You can see
Well,
that.
yeah, but nothing like,
No, no,
back.
No, I'm not quite OCD like Daryl, but I'm
Okay.
a little too organized.
That's great. I love it. So, last question here before we wrap up. What question do you wish someone would ask you about your book, but no one has?
Oh, that's a great one. Okay. No, that nobody has asked me. Well,
Yeah.
no one has asked me like what's next.
Right.
Nobody
There you go.
said, okay, so are you done? Is there another story in here? What comes after this?
Right.
At least they haven't asked me that yet. That doesn't mean that that won't happen, but and I'm happy to say it's not. I don't know. I'm not done, but I don't know whether this story is done. I have two series. The Haunted Shore Mystery. This is the fourth. I have another series that we talked about last time called Cruel Lessons, which is not a paranormal. And my latest has nothing to do with either of the first two. It's a historical suspense about the Revolutionary War that
Mm.
I'm working with an agent to hopefully find a home for it pretty soon. So and then after that, I'm working on the second entry in the Lessons in Peril series. After that, I'm really anxious to see how readers respond to Daryl and Aaron, and especially little Leo. Because if the response is like I think it's going to be, I'll make sure that I'm going to have another stop on their life journey that involves ghosts. That's for sure.
I love it. So, thank you so much, Randy. This was great. I look forward to having you on when your next book comes out and we can talk about that because that would be fun too. So, where can we find, your book and all, find you and all that good stuff?
Thank you for asking. The easiest way to find me and my book, excuse me, is simply on my website, which is just authorrandyoverbeck.com. On that website, there's a direct link to any of my books. More importantly, to my new book, and there's a link that will take you to Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Apple Books, any place that carries the books that you like to buy your books from. You can go straight from there. The book is available ebook and print. There will be an audio book available, but usually that's several months after the book launches. So it's a couple months ahead of when people will be hearing this or watching this.
Sure. Awesome. So please give them the title again, Randy, so they can find it.
Called Red Shadows at Saugatuck, the fourth entry in the Haunted Shore Mystery Series by Randy Overbeck.
And it has won multiple awards. The reviews look great. And I'm excited for you, Randy, because again, like we said at the beginning here, independent authors are the lifeblood of keeping people reading and keeping new ideas out there, keeping fresh ideas out there. And especially anything to do with the paranormal, I love because it's so interesting to me. And there's so many stories. And this story, it sounds amazing. I look forward to reading it and sharing it with my friends, and very excited about it. So thank you, Randy, taking time out. I really appreciate it.
Delighted to be here, John. Look forward to our next get together. Until then, what I say is keep reading those great stories. I hope one of them is mine.
Absolutely. Well, thanks, Randy, and we will talk later. Have a great day.
See ya.